Welcome to the First On Scene podcast from the Law Enforcement Death Response Team. Join us as we explore the experiences of first responders and their families. We will discuss some of the obstacles they face throughout their career and beyond, along with ways to stay healthy during and well after retirement. This podcast will provide resources for first responders and will share real-life stories to inspire and show the heroic strength we all have and can build on.
Hello, my name is Todd Thomas. I am the former chief of police for a mid-sized department in the Midwest. This podcast is brought to you by golawenforcement.com. If you are looking to recruit highly qualified candidates for your agency, or you are looking for a job in law enforcement, golawenforcement.com has one of the largest and most popular listings of law enforcement job openings. The Law Enforcement Death Response Team, also known as LEADER, is a group of volunteers, mostly current or former law enforcement, who proactively provide services to prevent law enforcement deaths by suicide by providing services like this podcast, other trainings, and symposiums for frontline workers. The team also acts as an immediate response team to assist any agency with any type of law enforcement employee death, including a line of duty death. Christmas parades. It's a time when communities come together to celebrate, put aside any differences or conflicts, and support each other. It's supposed to be a time of joy and peace. On November 21st, 2021, the city of Waukesha, Wisconsin, a suburb of the city of Milwaukee, was doing just that. And a horrific act of violence changed it all. Listen as Police Chief Dan Thompson tells us about that tragic day.
My name is Dan Thompson. I'm currently the Chief of Police for the City of Waukesha Police Department. I began my career in March of 1991 with the City of Milwaukee Police Department. I retired from Milwaukee Police Department after 29 years. I ended up getting accepted as Waukesha Chief of Police. The City of Waukesha has a population of 71,000 people. We have a police force of 124 sworn police officers. Total staff is about 167. What I love about Waukesha is you make a right turn, you're in farm fields. You make a left turn, you have urban. So it's a good blend of both urban and country, and it has a hometown feel. For 58 years, the Christmas parade was always done on the first Saturday before Thanksgiving. I remember it was pretty warm. It was about 41 to 45 degrees. We had like over 60 to 70 different groups and floats. My daughter was supposed to actually be in that parade as a cheerleader. She was on a cheer team for Waukesha West High School, but the coach was sick. So she wasn't going to go to the parade. We had the dancing grannies there. We had just a great turnout. The parade is a very festive, family-oriented event. And we had all of our community service officers out there. We had our reserve officers out there. And we had security like we'd done for all the years before. And we were prepared. And I was very impressed, actually, of how our security operations were prior to the event, getting ready for this parade. So prior to the event, everything was going as planned. We had our briefings ahead of time. We had all our officers where they were supposed to be, and everything was all set. The suspect had a domestic altercation at White Rock High School's at the front end of the parade. And there's a call of a subject with a knife. It's referring to that domestic violence incident with the suspect. At that same time, the suspect flees in his red Ford SUV, and he drives up to my first sergeant. And the sergeant says, "Hey, there's a parade route, you need to move." He drives past. Well, the officers are initially thinking that, and we've encountered this before, a person makes a wrong turn, you just redirect them and get them back to where they need to go. He then confronts one of our detectives who's working this, and he almost runs that detective over. And he proceeds to drive at a high rate of speed through the parade route. And the average speed investigation ended up indicating it was about 41 miles an hour. I need you to think about this. For almost a mile long, 41 miles an hour of a highly congested parade route with kids, with family members, floats, you name it. And this suspect drove through without any type of concern for the public. People are initially in shock. You can actually see them in shock. And he's actually physically run over. You could hear the impacts of him hitting people with the car. And you're hearing people screaming, and it's taking them seconds to realize what was happening. So when the suspect drove through, it wasn't like he was avoiding. He was actually, I call it the Christmas parade attack. He was driving into and over people, and he'd turn into other people and drive into and over them. So he drives through, and when he gets towards the end of the parade route, one of my officers engages him and fires shots to stop the threat. And the suspect continues on.
You will now be hearing the actual radio traffic from the officers at that scene.
Shots Parkway School, suspect going south on west and red toward focus.
When you looked at his car, when it was all said and done, it looked like it got hit by another car, but that's not from other cars, that's from human beings impacting a car so hard that it actually pushed in the front end of the car.
Yes, it's a Ford Escape SUV, heavy front end damage.
There was no doubts that he was intentionally driving through that crowd to injure, hurt, and kill people.
The next radio traffic you hear is going to be officers giving updates and using police codes. In this jurisdiction, a 1078 would mean officer needs assistance. A 1052 would be need ambulances. And the worst ones, a PNB, that would be a pulseless non-breather. And a J3 would mean deceased.
Yeah, 1078, we got about 10 to 15 people down in the street.
Copy, 1078. 1078, we have multiple subjects down. 10 to 15 people, main and gas fire. Repeating, main and gas fire, 1078.
Get me available officers to the downtown. I've got about 30 to 40 casualties down Main Street. Well, my unit 1052 in front of People's Park. Female, not conscious, not breathing. Kent County, everybody here available now. Starts with 5-year-old. I'm trying to get into a vehicle to get into the hospital. Alert all the hospital.
I copy of a 5-year-old who's trying to get to WMH.
Made in Maple. Subject down. Pedestrians doing CPR.
Copy, shots are fired.
Donnie boys, there are multiple patients. One is almost J3. In front of People's Park, there is another victim in the 5 Point. Gabriel is reporting 2 juveniles with shallow breathing in front of Bosco's. Face at Maple and Maine. 1 P&B. We have most other people down. CPR in progress, nearly J3. One's in front of Curry, one's in front of Donnie Boys.
So the fire department, they have what's called MAVIS. It's kind of like our 1078. It's all hands on deck. Any fire engine from around the surrounding area or ambulances, please come and help. They conveyed 20 individuals to the hospital. We conveyed all of the others to the hospital. When I say we, I'm talking about the police and private citizens. There were 73 that were injured. 6 ended up losing their lives because of his attack. These were the individuals that were killed as a result of that attack. We had Tamara Durand, who was 52 years of age. Lee Owen, who was 71 years of age. Virginia Sorensen, who was 79 years of age. And William Hospital, who was 81 years of age. They were all near and around where dancing grannies were struck. And you had Jane Coolidge, who was 57 years of age, who was by South Division High School Marching Band. So that's toward the beginning of the parade. So she was one of the first people that was actually killed. Not the first one struck, but the first one that died as a result of that attack. Jackson Sparks was 8 years of age. who was walking with his Little League baseball team. Jackson Sparks ended up passing 2 days after the incident. I talked about little Sparks. I'll never forget Officer Hendrickson picked him up, put him to a sheriff's department vehicle. Sheriff's department vehicle speeds off to the hospital. He survives 2 days, and the family said to Officer Hendrickson, "You carried him to the hospital. We want you to carry him to eternal life and made him a pallbearer." There's so many amazing stories like that. We had an off-duty detective who was there with his 2 kids and his wife. The suspect ran over both, sent one flying 15 feet, who hit a curb. The other one he completely ran over. So we have officers that are responding. The detective is yelling for, because he couldn't find his kids. One was sent into the crowd 15 feet. And I'll never forget talking to one of the officers later who was so conflicted and so upset because he goes, "I want to help the detective, but I have all these other people that need help too." It really messed him up inside. But it turned out the detectives, both kids, and they're making full recoveries, which is incredible. Policy says you don't put people in your squad. Ambulances do that. Policy goes out the window when it means doing the right thing. And we talk about this all the time. Policies are good, but doing the right thing is even more important. What I saw is in my young officers, and I saw in the fire department and off-duty nurses and doctors that were all there, they just did the right thing.
I'm at the New Japan restaurant. I got a young boy with me, no adults, possible GSW to the leg, also multiple broken bones. I need someone here quick. I'm putting everything on.
13, I believe all the ambos are occupied. If you could just take them to the hospital.
My fleet is about 6 blocks away. I got Brookfield and Pewaukee squads right in front pulling up.
Copy, put them in their squad and take them to WMH. We have nobody right now.
Copy.
The victims that didn't leave the scene, I'll never forget this, is we had officers that stood by them because we weren't going to leave them alone. We weren't going to leave them alone until they, until they were conveyed from the scene to wherever they're going to go. And that was just incredible seeing that.
Chief Thompson reminds us that the psychological impact may not always be easy to recognize. And for the bosses and administrators like him who have a certain paternal instinct to care for their team members, it may even be harder to recognize. We are all sponges, what we see and what we experience, and rank means nothing. And great leaders will do what Chief Thompson did. They will recognize that impact and then demonstrate to their people that it is not just okay, but it is good to get help.
What I thought we did very well is prior to anyone leaving the scene, we had grief counselors, clinical therapists already in the police station. So when some officer came off the street, they were already engaged with the clinician to help them on the wellness side of the house. And that was excellent. Where in hindsight is 2020, I remember being, us as a leadership team, all the supervisors being so focused on making sure the officers had what they needed for wellness that I forgot that my supervisors needed as well. So they're working 16, 18 hours, making sure our officers were good. When in hindsight, I should have, even though they said they didn't need it, relieved them so they could actually recalibrate, right? We ended up doing that some days later. But I remember walking in after to the briefing, and normally with debriefs, you don't interrupt those. And I had to. I felt compelled to do it. I walked in there and I told him, I said, where you were is where God intended you to be. So don't second guess yourself. Don't what if. I love each and every one of you. And I'm honored to be here with you. And I remember telling him I loved him and walking out there all like love you, Chief, and it still gets me choked up to this day because people forget that officers are human beings. And they were traumatized by that event just as much as any citizen that was out there. And we have a strong desire to keep our people safe. And all these things, you can see it going through them. And so immediately after that, we set up resiliency training. We did a lot of those type of things for our officers and with the fire department as well. Where I really learned a lot about myself is, and this actually goes to 9 months after the event, so busy working and trying to help my team that I made all these excuses on how this was not affecting me at all. I had 29 years with Milwaukee and working homicide. I've seen hundreds of gruesome, terrible things. I remember going to, I think it was Atlanta, there's a International Chiefs Association Wellness Symposium, and I'm talking to them about the parade. And we're talking about wellness and how all this stuff is important. And I'm actually seeing civilian clinicians crying, seeing law enforcement, peer support people crying. We get done and we're going, it's like a little cocktail hour after this. And they did what I call intervention on me. They're like, okay, sounds like you did all these great things to help your officers. Who are you talking to? I'm like, son of a buck. I made all the excuses. I don't have time. I'm not addressing how this affected me internally. And it actually is affecting me physically. Because prior to the parade, I was just under 200 pounds. Post-parade leading up to the first anniversary, I was almost 250 pounds. I gained 50 pounds of stress weight, is what I call it, because I was not dealing with how it emotionally injured me. Because I came up through a culture of suck it up, kid, minor flesh wound, and move forward. As a result of the parade, and this is controversial, but we now have mandatory neck-up checkups, is what we call it. And the mandatory neck-up checkups are department-wide. You have to go meet one of the clinicians, whether it's 2 minutes, 10 minutes, or an hour, you have to meet with them because it's a requirement. And there was resistance at first year, and we had to have a talk with them and tell them, is you might think that you're fine, and you might be, but your brother and sister might not be, so you're going for them. And one of our biggest resistors, he basically threatened, you might as well charge with insubordination, I'm not going. We end up having a conversation with that individual. They end up going. Turns out that they were one of the individuals that needed it the most. So I do my neck-up checkup, and I'm telling her the story about how even now, this is 2024. I just did my second neck-up checkup, and I'm talking to her, and I'm telling her I'll still have tears that just come down my eyes. And I'm like, and I'm happy. I'm fine. What's going on? So she told me, you're normal. There's nothing wrong with you.
After deliberating for 3 hours, the jury found the suspect guilty on all 76 charges, which included 6 counts of first-degree intentional homicide. He was sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the First On Scene podcast from the Law Enforcement Death Response Team. If you did, please subscribe. Also, check out the listings of law enforcement job openings on golawenforcement.com. Thanks for listening.